All right, I think we will get started here. Again, I'll add my thanks to Macy's for you joining this afternoon to talk about breaking barriers to solar, customized options, solar options for your organization. My name is Jim Nail. I'm president of Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm joined here by our partners at Resonant Energy, Macy Zander and Rachel Gentile. We've worked together on a number of projects, and as you'll see, they have a lot of really creative ways to approach helping nonprofit organizations, and in Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light's case, churches and synagogues and other houses of worship, ways to make solar affordable and a realistic option to help them move forward. So let's go to the agenda here. And what we're going to do over the next hour or so, give a little bit more introduction. I'll start with some more info about MassIPL in just a second, and do a little setup of just how urgent the need is to address the climate emergency these days. I'm sure many of you have followed over the last couple of weeks what's been going on in Glasgow. So you're probably well aware of all that, but we'll hit a couple of highlights there and then transition by talking briefly about the role solar can play in addressing the climate emergency. And then I will hand it over to Macy to tell you more about Resonant and take you through some really, really interesting case studies of projects that they have done. So let's get into it here. First of all, Masjids Interfaith Power and Light. Here's some of the facts and figures about us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, 240 member congregations. We're part of a national interfaith power and light organization with 40 state chapters around the country. But what's really more important about us is that we are, as our name says, interfaith. So it's all faiths, but who are all bound together by this common concern for the earth and for environmental justice. And that's really our mission of putting our faith in action to achieve climate justice. But the next slide, I think, has a little bit more meat, and it's probably more important than just the dry facts and figures. This is really the way we phrase our mission. First of all, we encourage our members to pray. And that's like, how do we connect this need to act on climate, the climate emergency, to the beliefs of our faith and the tenets of our faith traditions, really making sure that that's a really core motivation then for taking action, particularly lowering our carbon footprints in our house of worship or other buildings that may be affiliated with our house of worship, like a parsonage or a school or what have you. But then also, hopefully, the members of the congregation taking that home to their homes, their schools, their businesses, really all places where we can lower our energy use and carbon footprint, but also mobilizing. So we have a advocacy program where we're working, particularly at the state level right now, on policies that will build a more sustainable world and fill out the state's climate goals of 50% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So by working across those three arms, we feel like we have a good program to help people of faith address this. So let's get into this reason and why this is such an urgent issue. No doubt many of you saw over the summer the new UN climate change report called it a red alert for the planet. And we've seen all the stories, the horrible wildfire season in California this year, just these disastrous flooding that happened in Tennessee in particular. And then the flip side of that here in the Colorado River Basin, I think this is a shot from Lake Powell behind the Glen Canyon Dam, where the drought has been so severe for so many years. The Colorado River is at historic lows. All of these things are the kinds of extremes that scientists have said for a long time would result from climate change. So it isn't just, oh, there's some weird weather, oh, it's a bad fire season, oh, it's kind of dry. This really is what scientists have been predicting, and it is a pretty scary foreshadowing of what the future could be like if we don't take aggressive action. Next slide, please. And then, but we don't have to go all to these other states and things to look at this. We can see those things in Massachusetts as well, but particularly for people of faith, I think there's an even deeper motivation relating to issues of justice, which is a core part of our mission. And here, I think the words of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from their 2014 report actually capture this sort of moral imperative really well. Because as much as here in the US, we might be affected by climate change, the worst impacts are expected to exacerbate poverty in the developing countries. And in those countries, it's the people who are socially, economically, culturally, or otherwise marginalized who are especially vulnerable. And as people of faith, we're called to have compassion for those who suffer. We're also called to look at our own actions and how they might be contributing to that suffering. And we know driving our cars, heating our homes, all the ways that we use energy, contributes to climate change and contributes to increasing carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. So as people of faith, when we understand these impacts, we want to amend our ways, we want to atone for that, and we want to, do better going forward. And we can, and we'll get into this in a lot more detail in the next section. But you may remember, from a number of years ago, the mantra, reduce, reuse, recycle. That was from the days when solid waste was probably the leading environmental issue. So for climate change, there's kind of a similar mantra, though I couldn't come up with a third R for phase out fossil fuels, but certainly reduce. So be more energy efficient, do things like insulate and all that stuff. Renewables, which is what we're going to talk most about today, a lot about solar, and then phasing out fossil fuels. So getting off of gas or oil to heat our homes in particular. And all of these things MassIPL can help your organization with in a different offering, which I'll have to do another webinar about at some other time, our version of an energy audit. We call it environmental stewardship assessment. But we're here really to talk about solar power. And this is something that MassIPL has been very involved in for about 10 years. So Macy, give me the next slide there. We've had a Solar Power for Faith Communities program for about 10 years. And we've helped about 60 congregations directly. And what we do is, we help the congregation and support the congregation through this evaluation decision process, educating them all about solar, educating them about the state incentive programs, giving them advice as they go through the process. We work with high quality, reliable solar companies like Resonant Energy, because there are a lot of, certainly a lot of companies out there, and it's kind of hard to know where to start. So we vet and pick the companies we work with very carefully. And now that we've been doing this for a while, we have a network of houses of worship who've gone solar. So if any of our members start down this path and want to talk to others who've been down that path, that can be very helpful to help them move that process forward. And I could say, going back to around 2010, 2011, when we started this program, I could count on the fingers of one hand the number of houses of worship that had solar at that time. But if you go to the next slide, we now just updated my list in the last month or so, and I'm up to 120 houses of worship across the state, a total of 4.25 megawatts of solar panels. It's something like, that would power about 1,000 homes or something. A lot more to go because there's about 3,000 houses of worship in the state. So we're just getting started. We hope that a lot of you on the call today will take the next steps to join this 120 houses of worship going forward. And the right people to help you do that are Resonant Energy and my colleague, Macy Zander. So Macy, over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jim, for that really comprehensive overview. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. As Jim said, my name is Macy Zander, and I'm the Community Program Manager here at Resonant Energy. So to those of you who might not be familiar with us, Resonant is a B Corp, employee-owned solar provider based in Dorchester. And we're the only solar company in the Northeastern US to be almost entirely focused on nonprofit organizations. We actually got our start here at this church that's depicted, Second Church in Dorchester. Our mission for doing this work very much boils down to the belief that solar is something that should be accessible to everyone, specifically the organizations and communities that had been traditionally left out of the clean energy movement. Our work is to make complex projects in Massachusetts and New York a reality by working with a network of third-party financiers, mission-aligned lenders, and a network of vetted installation partners. To date, we are proud to have done 168 projects, 70 of which have been located in environmental justice communities. All of this has totaled 4.5 megawatts of installed capacity. Over their useful life, these installations will generate 113,000 megawatt hours, or 5.6 million in savings for our nonprofit clients. And it will save our planet 47,000 metric tons of CO2. And as Jim mentioned with his nice map of the houses of worship who have gone solar in the state of Massachusetts, we have worked with 1/3 of them in the past 5 years. We also focus our work on other nonprofits, including affordable housing providers, community development corporations, educational organizations, and other community-centered institutions. We've led 2 statewide affordable housing campaigns with the Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC, and the Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations. So the focus of this webinar, to everyone who read the summary when they signed up, is to break down some of the most common barriers that nonprofit organizations face while considering going solar. Spoiler alert, going solar isn't always easy. We wouldn't be having this webinar if it was. But our hope is that you can leave this presentation feeling equipped with the knowledge of some tried and true solutions to make solar a reality for your organization. If we are to group the main categories of issues and barriers we hear the most frequently in the industry, it's predominantly around financing issues, structural compatibility to host solar on your property, and a lack of organizational capacity. Historically, due to incentive structures that have largely favored tax credits, nonprofit organizations have largely been left out of the mainstream push to solarize our towns and our cities. Assessing the tax credit, arguably one of the most important vehicles for incentivizing widespread solar uptake, is a real issue that all nonprofits face. Going deeper than that, many organizations struggle with finding the capital to finance a system upfront from the get-go. Building and roof circumstances can also pose a challenge. If a building's roof is oriented north or shaded considerably, the yield for the project can decline and negatively impact the amount of energy your system can produce, which draws out the payback period for the solar system. Some roof materials are simply just very difficult, if not close to impossible to work with, such as slate. It's also highly advisable to not place solar on a roof that's going to be older than 10 to 12 years. These systems ideally should be on your roof for 25 years. And the last thing, if you're an organization, that you're going to want to do is to deinstall the solar only to replace your roof, reinstall the system, because it is a costly endeavor. Lastly, in terms of our summaries of the barriers, going solar takes time. It takes volunteer and it takes staff capacity, which is frequently limited for a nonprofit organization. There are also multiple layers to the nonprofit decision-making process, from committee meetings to board meetings to congregational meetings to everything in between. We know this can add a layer of added complexity, something that we are very adept to navigating. So let's dive a little bit into some of the solutions. Starting with the first category of barriers, we're going to focus first on financing solutions. We'll cover the role of grants in a direct purchase situation, the role that low-cost loans can play, hybrid ownership, and power purchase agreements. For each of these solutions, we'll share a case study of a local nonprofit, of a local organization that has successfully overcome these barriers to go solar, despite having some very real challenges. So the first of the solutions accessible to nonprofit organizations, and perhaps also the most intuitive, is to find grants that can support your project. In the case study here of Mujeres Unidas Avanzado, a Dorchester-based organization that focuses on Latin women empowerment and education, they were able to find 3 separate grants to finance their project in totality. A City of Boston grant provided half of the project price, with the remainder being covered by 2 private foundations. For organizations that have a particularly strong mission focus and a compelling narrative about the benefits of solar to their organization, searching for grants can be a very worthwhile endeavor. However, low interest and philanthropic loans are even more within the realm of possibility for many nonprofit organizations. Borrowing money is inexpensive right now across the board, and working with a mission-aligned lender can provide even better terms. For example, the Episcopal Diocese of Eastern Massachusetts offers a green loan that comes with 10-year terms with a 1.5 to 2.25 interest rate. This is a great option to churches and schools and other organizations that are affiliated with the Episcopal Diocese.
And, Macy, it's not just the Episcopal Church. That's probably the best loan out there. But there are other building loan programs, sort of more general building loan programs. I know the Unitarian organization has one. The UCC has them. I believe the Baptists do as well. And they're typically below market interest rates, maybe not quite as good as that green loan. But again, there are sources of funding that are pretty available to houses of worship with just a little bit of digging.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. So running off this idea of utilizing a loan to purchase a solar system, in many cases, the electricity savings from the solar system, plus the incentives an organization receives, can outweigh the loan payments, and an organization can start seeing savings from the beginning. In this case study that's presented here, we've shown the breakdown for a real 25 kilowatt project that we've worked on recently. The organization was able to secure a loan payment assuming 12-year 4.25% interest rates, which resulted in yearly payments of roughly $7,000 annually. However, their annual electricity savings and their smart payments, which is the Massachusetts Solar Incentive Program for Solar, all of these together were enough to cover the debt service right from year 1. Which leads to our next solution for organizations that are trying to make solar a reality but are facing financial barriers. As we alluded to, yeah,
Macy, before you do that, we did get a question come in that I thought it would be timely to answer now rather than wait till later. And I neglected up front to tell people, please do input your questions into either the Q&A or the chat. And we've scheduled this so we'll have time at the end to answer a lot. But I thought this one particular question was really important about, one of my concerns with solar is there's a lot of embodied carbon in the materials. Do you have an estimate as to how much time it takes to repay the embodied carbon? I know I've seen a National Renewable Energy Laboratory study on that says it's about 18 months to 2 years. And that's the most authoritative study I've seen, Macy. I don't know if you know of others.
I've seen that study as well, and to my knowledge, that is the most
Yeah,
authoritative study out there.
yeah,
But yeah, to the person who asked that question, it's a really good one.
it's a good one. Yeah,
And yeah, we'll provide our contact information at the end of this and would be happy to do more digging for you if that would be useful.
yeah.
Great. All right. Yeah, thanks for the good questions. And we are planning to have at least 15 minutes of Q&A, maybe more, towards the end of this presentation. So yeah, looking forward to getting to more of those questions and having a bit more of a conversation with folks that are here. So jumping back again to the second solution that we want to discuss, I had mentioned it earlier, but one of the biggest roadblocks to nonprofit solar uptake is the inability to capitalize on the federal investment tax credit. Fortunately, there are workarounds here. Resonant Energy and Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light have worked extensively with our partners at Collective Sun, whose network of tax equity investors are able to effectively purchase the investment tax credit and provide a 12 to a 15% discount to a nonprofit's project price in exchange for the tax credit that the organization isn't able to access. Organizations, in order to qualify for this program, do need to be able to fit 25 kilowatts DC of installed capacity, which is roughly the roof area of 2,700 square feet for a sloped roof and closer to 3,500 to 4,000 square feet for a flat roof. This particular solution is one of the most common financing mechanisms we've seen for single site projects. And frequently, it's the option that also yields the best rate of return for nonprofits. This option, when coupled with a philanthropic loan, is a great option for an organization that wants to keep all of the electricity value their system generates while maintaining all of the state incentives. This is also something to consider if your organization has ever considered starting your own LLC in order to access the tax credits. Opting for this can sometimes be a better alternative if you want to avoid any costly and complex legal processes that go with the arrangement and the setup of an LLC. For financing solutions, this particular option can now be coupled with a philanthropic loan program. And you'll see that there's a little emblem in the top right-hand corner called Sun for All. And this particular loan program, also offered by Collective Sun, now offers a 3.5% 10-year term for any qualifying organization, pending admission into the program. And this is something that also really contributes to being able to see a cash positive cash flow right from year one, where you're able to cover the debt service just from your electricity savings because the loan terms are quite good. So a project that recently went this hybrid route is Mount Auburn Cemetery here in Cambridge, which is pictured here. Due to their nonprofit status, they were not able to access the tax credit. But through this financing agreement, they were able to access an overhead discount of roughly half the value of the investment tax credit for their 129 kilowatt rooftop project. Another interesting case study for this is the Westwood Interfaith Solar Initiative that happened back in 2019. This involved 4 houses of worship in the town that were able to move forward with installing over 100 kilowatts of combined installed capacity. All of the organizations opted for this hybrid ownership option to monetize part of the investment tax credit. And since they were able to collaborate, they were able to leverage bulk pricing discounts, which resulted in even deeper savings for their organizations. This is a particularly good option to emulate if your nonprofit is able to think of other nonprofits it can partner with in the area. Starting a workshop or a town-based presentation is a really good first step. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where your organization has a roof that's a strong candidate for solar, or you have a large parking lot that could host a solar canopy, but there isn't an appetite for using upfront capital or taking out a loan, a no-cost option may be the solution. With a power purchase agreement, a third-party financer owns the system, and the host organization purchases electricity at a discounted rate over a set period of time, usually between 20 to 30 years. The benefit of this option is there's no upfront cost, and your nonprofit has the benefit of knowing that your locked-in rate will be set in the face of variable rates from the utility. For organizations that are seeking certainty on electricity rates for the long term and for budgeting purposes, this is a really solid alternative. It's also important to note that due to declining incentives and lower value of energy in national grid territory in particular, organizations that have a large electricity use, good solar exposure, and ideally located in Eversource East territory are going to be better candidates for this option. So our case study depicted here for this option is the Epiphany School in Dorchester. And Epiphany School did a two-phase project and in total ended up installing 52 kilowatts to power their classrooms. Resonant worked with our partners at SunWealth as the third-party financer for this option.
Yeah, and this is one of the more popular options, again, because it doesn't require any fundraising or, the whole evaluation of the loan and things like that. So it is kind of disappointing that, they're becoming a little bit harder to get, particularly in national grid territories. But we'll keep working on that.
Yeah. We need Mass IPL to do some good lobbying of the state.
We're on it.
Great. For our next set of common barriers that we see to nonprofit solar uptake, we are going to focus now on structural solutions. It goes without saying that every building and property is different. And for each organization, there's its own specific challenges, but also its own opportunity. Depending on your organization's situation, a solution that might be most ideal is a roof-mounted solar system, a ground-mounted system, a parking canopy, or perhaps being an off-taker for a community shared solar array. So one of the most common structural issues we see is roof feasibility. As I mentioned earlier, the age of the roof is really critical here. Typically, you're going to want to avoid putting solar on a roof that's older than 10 to 12 years. Otherwise, a replacement is going to be recommended. Assuming your organization's roof meets this age threshold, there are a number of factors that are considering when designing a solar system. The slope of your roof, the amount of weight the structure can support, the roof's material, and its overall size all lend themselves to different types of racking solutions that can be employed. For a standard asphalt shingle roof and the most common sloped roofs, mechanical attachments with penetrations into the building structure are going to be the most common option here. For a typical EPDM rubber or TPO flat roof, a ballast mounted system, which is weighted down by cement blocks, is going to be the best solution. In the case of a flat roof that's covered with HVAC or other equipment that takes up a lot of space, a post and rail system might be ideal. This arrangement is able to elevate the solar above the equipment so the full space of the roof can be utilized, which is a really good option for an organization that has a large roof in order to achieve economies of scale. And for every project that does get built in Massachusetts, in New York, city building permits and stamped structural approval from an engineer are always necessary. So you can rest assured that if your organization is going solar, there's going to be several steps that have to be checked off in order for the project to be signed off on. And in the situation, of course, where your roof or your structure aren't adequate for solar, but there's considerable space, a solar parking canopy or a ground mount are also good options. which I'm going to discuss a little bit more in detail later. So staying with the conversation about the different types of racking solutions available for rooftop systems, these are some of the 4 common options that we see. For a ballast mounted system, which is depicted here, no penetrations are necessary, which makes for an easy and a cost-effective install. However, it is one of the most heavy options, coming in at 6 to 10 pounds per square foot. If your goal is to decrease the overall weight of the system, ballast racking with a combination of glue attachments can offset the number of ballasts needed. Mechanical attachments are the most common option for a roof with a greater pitch than 7 degrees. With this arrangement on a pitched roof, the panels lay flush on the racking and the penetrations into the building structure are surrounded by sealant and flashing. This is maybe not the best picture because this is a flat roof, but you can get an idea of what the penetration looks like, and you can get an idea of what the flashing looks like over the penetration. And then if your organization doesn't have a very large roof, you have a high consumption rate of electricity, and you want to maximize the amount of solar that you can install on your roof, wavelet racking is the most dense way to get as much installed capacity as possible on a roof surface. Just keep in mind that this is also a heavier option. If you would like to avoid the roof entirely, ground mounts, like what's pictured here, are an option. This is Tifereth Israel in New Bedford, who had a plot of empty land adjacent to their temple to build a 129 kilowatt system. If your organization has a parking lot, a parking canopy is an excellent way to utilize space. It also has the added benefit of being something that the state of Massachusetts is really trying to incentivize right now. So there is a higher incentive bracket for parking canopies across the different utility zones. So this particular 336 kilowatt system was built in Lexington at Temple Amuna. With both ground mounts and parking canopies, it's recommended to have a system that can be at least 100 kilowatts in size in order to achieve economies of scale and keep down the price per watt. With these systems, it's possible to opt for an ownership option or to partner with a third-party financer who can, in some situations, provide lease payments in exchange for utilizing your land or your parking lot. The latter is particularly relevant for larger projects in Eversource East. So Temple Amuna's system, depicted here, is actually a third-party owned lease system, and the temple is currently purchasing half of the energy that the system is producing, while the other half is being sold at a discount to low-income residents in the greater Boston area. This selling of excess electricity produced by an organization with an oversized system like Temple Amuna is what we call here community shared solar. The benefits of this solar solution are that organizations that have the extra space, whether it be a roof, a parking lot, or a plot of land, can oversize their project beyond their organization's needs. Bigger projects drive down the price per watt, and in the case that your nonprofit owns the array through a direct purchase or a hybrid ownership model, this option allows for you to achieve another stream of income from selling off the excess electricity. And on the flip side, if you're an organization that's going to be unable to host solar on your own property, it's possible to become an off-taker and purchase discounted electricity from an overproducing community shared solar project. And the case study for this one is St. Peter's Church, St. Peter's Episcopal Church located in Weston. The roof of the church was large enough to more than host the installed capacity that the congregation needed, which allowed them to overbuild a 30 kilowatt sized array. And by utilizing a shared solar platform, the church was able to sell 13,842 kilowatt hours of excess electricity. And the off-taker was Yusuf Mosque in Brighton, who wanted to go solar, but because they had a slate roof and weren't able to, they were instead able to purchase the electricity from the church at a discount of 15%. So this brings me to the final overarching barrier that we frequently see nonprofits mention. And that surrounds just capacity. Questions about how a time-strapped nonprofit can justify the time spent towards considering and pursuing a solar project is very real. For organizations that are run predominantly by volunteers, this is really relevant. So the key goal here is to find a way that the solar is able to strengthen rather than deplete your organizational resources. So for schools or nonprofits that have an education component, incorporation of solar into the classroom is something that can provide a second motivation for pursuing a project. Solar can be a tool for student engagement into the sciences, while also serving as a practical tool for students to learn about electricity and sustainability. At the Windsor School in Boston, it was actually students concerned about the environment and climate change that organized and pushed the school to consider solar. At the Epiphany School, solar was integrated into the classroom and served as a hands-on learning tool for the students there. So this photo at the bottom right-hand corner shows students actually making their own mini solar systems at that school. And for all nonprofit organizations, solar can be used to reach larger sustainability goals and to model the stewardship values that they espouse and talk about. For all projects, we recommend that there be a follow-up solar celebration and workshop so community members are able to learn about their unique system, its contribution to the overall sustainability initiatives and efforts of their organization. And that's exactly what's pictured in the bottom left. Of course, this is pre-COVID times, but this was a celebration and workshop that happened at First Church in Swampscott when they completed their 25 kilowatt system. And then lastly, a frequent thing that we often hear during an organization's solar process is how much it was able to contribute to the community and increase engagement within their organization. So this is particularly the case for volunteer-led nonprofits, like a house of worship. Having a common project to engage folks on that'll have a direct impact on the organization's environmental goals is something that can really be leveraged to strengthen the organization internally. So if capacity is an issue holding your organization back, do know that Resonant provides a turnkey product, and our goal is to ultimately absorb the complexity and be the center point for all the engaged stakeholders, whether that be the installers, the utility, the financiers. The goal is to try and make solar easy for nonprofits.
And that's where Resonant is a great partner with Mass IPL. Because I said earlier, Mass IPL will do a lot of that work, educating your governing body, educating your congregation, your finance team. And we can facilitate a lot of those discussions early on to get people really comfortable with this so that when you get a proposal from Resonant or another provider, you know what you're looking at, and people are, ready to move forward with it. So that's where, happy to come in. We can make this sort of initial evaluation, get a sense of how much shade, what orientation your roof is, talk to you a little bit about the condition of the roof, et cetera. And then, work with, whoever is the champion of the solar project at the House of Worship to educate other stakeholders and the congregation, and really get the groundwork laid for you to get into more of the technical and financial details with our friends here at Resonant. And one of the reasons that we picked Resonant to work with probably 5-6 years ago now is again because they have that shared mission of bringing solar to the types of organizations and populations that otherwise might not be able to do it. And so they're a great partner with us in helping manage, as Macy said, helping manage that commitment so that it is fits into your capacity as an organization.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, and I wanted to quickly trace, if you talk to Mass IPL and you're like, what are the next steps? Or if you speak with us and you're excited, what are the next steps? So ultimately, once we have your organization's electricity bill and your address, we're able to utilize satellite imagery to identify the best locations for solar within your organization's property. So based on your building's electricity usage throughout a full year cycle, we'll be able to size the system in a way that'll optimize the available state incentives as well as the utility policies, depending upon which utility zone you're in. We'll work with you to understand what your organization's priorities are and to strategize around potential issues or challenges that may come up. From here, we'll generate a preliminary design that we can share over in a comprehensive proposal, which will be inclusive of a 25-year cash flow projection. And then we'll sit with you to review this proposal and the relevant financial pathways and incentives with your organization. And we'll also work with you to outline the next steps for near-term, or if it so be it, long-term solarizing. So with that, you are welcome to contact myself. This is my email address. Here's Jim's email address. And feel free to reach out if you're curious to see if solar makes sense for your organization. And with that, I will hand it over to folks who are interested in posing some questions.
I see we've got a bunch of good questions coming in. This will be a good session. As we said, we've got about 15 minutes, so keep them coming. We'll try to address any or all that we can. One quick clarification question I saw before was about when we're talking about the age of the roof, are you talking about just the roof covering or the structural elements of the roof? And really that's mainly the roof covering, and that 10 to 12 years is particularly relevant to shingles or a rubber membrane kind of roof, TPO or EPDM that Macy alluded to before. As we said, slate was really hard to deal with at all. And I think that person also mentioned metal, which I actually have not come across a metal roof, but I imagine metal roof wouldn't have the same kind of age restriction.
Yeah, metal roofs, depending on the type, if it's corrugated metal, tends to have more issues with supporting and often does need a mechanical attachment, to my understanding. But there are other types of metal roofs that are pretty high quality that last for 50 years. And so in that situation, it's not necessary to have a roof that's 10 years old. So there are definitely caveats there. And you have our contact information to whoever posed that question if you want to follow up, and have you arrange a phone call with you to discuss what's best for your given roof.
He wrote back, sealed seam steel roofing. A seamed roof should be okay. Do you think?
For fear of
I'm sure
incriminating myself with wrong information, I'm going to look that up and we'll get back with you.
Yeah, that's where you get to a level of technical detail that you need the experts on for sure. There have been a number of questions come in about solar shingles, and Macy, you and I were talking about that just the other day a little bit. So I guess I'll start with sort of the two basic things are, one, they tend to be a lot less efficient than panels are these days. I think they're more in the 10 to 12% efficiency versus panels now are 18, 19, 20% efficiency typically. But theoretically, you can cover more of the roof with them, so maybe it balances out. But I'd say the other question there is there aren't really any shingle products on the market that have the track record and have the experience and have the amount of time in the market that panels do these days. There was a company, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was a division of Dow that was doing solar shingles, and then they went out of business. So I know a lot of questions come up about Tesla, and Macy, you and I talked a little bit about Tesla the other day. What's your take there?
Yeah, I would say solar shingles haven't really, in a very meaningful way, entered the Northeastern market. They've been predominantly more in California, with Tesla being the predominant producer of them. There have been some issues. I think that supply chain constrictions are hitting Tesla in particular, from what I have seen and from what our partners have seen. And so I would say we're a couple of years from solar shingles becoming a strong reality, but stay tuned. And for the most part, they've also been in the residential market. I don't think it's been a super common solution for nonprofit organizations and for commercial organizations as well.
Yeah.
And
Here's
yeah, go on ahead, Jim, please.
Sorry, here's another roofing related question, as long as we're talking roof, because that is obviously a big consideration. So here's someone anticipate replacing flat roof and some of the roof deck, but our roofer tells us solar panels will void the warranty of the new roof, and so recommends against the project. So they're trying to figure out, can they do something to keep the warranty and maximize the solar panels?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's something that we would have to look at the warranty to get a bit more granularity on what your roofer has said. But typically with most mainstream manufacturers, they're fine with solar, as long as you follow like the patterns of due diligence in order to make sure that you're doing everything they need. Typically the roof warranty is not voided. So I'd be happy to, I think an email conversation or a phone call might be easier. But sticking with the roof theme, I just saw that there's a question, I guess it's a little different than the roof theme, about how long solar panels last. And are they going to become outdated with newer technology? So a solar panel lasts, what we project on paper is 25 years is how long they are under something called a production guarantee. And with the production guarantee, essentially what this is saying is that the panels are not losing their ability to generate electricity by more than 0.5% per year. So at year 25, your panels should still be operating at 80 to 85% efficiency, which means that by no means do you have to remove the panels at year 25. Ideally, your organization would be able to keep them on longer, 30, 35 years, depending on how well they're working. So there's no set age there, but I would say 25 years is kind of that minimum. And will they become outdated with newer technology? I think with all technology, I would be lying to say no, because there's constantly innovations that are happening within the industry, but solar panels at the moment are at an all-time low for their cost. And they've improved dramatically in the last couple of decades. We've seen a really, really big jump. So yeah.
Though I can tell you that my church put panels on in about 2013, and I think those panels are, I would say, I think they're 240 watt panels, and now panels are closer to 30 or 300 watts. So over 7 years, you can see there's kind of this slow, steady incremental gain. You always read about, the next breakthrough that's in the lab, whether it's perovskites or, other kinds of materials. But, I don't see anything in the next, 5 to 10 years that is for sure going to come to market and beat the technology that's out there. And again, with the, right now with the urgency of climate change and the economics, either way you look at it, the current state of technology is very, very positive.
Yeah, definitely. And I see quite a few questions pertaining to the infrastructure bill and the Build
Mm,
Back Better
mm.
bill. So folks know the infrastructure bill has been passed. Build Back Better is still awaiting a few levels in order to actually go through. We are keeping a close eye. The Build Back Better bill is going to be the one that has serious implications for the solar industry, all quite positive. And that's something that Resonant is tracking closely. And we will be doing a pretty comprehensive blog post on it that we will be sharing with our newsletter list. So stay tuned is my answer there. Jim, is there anything that you know about?
Yeah, no, but I think you're right. I think it's really the Build Back Better bill, if that gets enacted, where we'll see a lot more support for solar. It seems like the infrastructure bill is more about, grid modernization, and like public transportation. And those are kind of the climate elements of that bill.
And I see another question here about a PPA and what happens if you pursue a PPA, but then you end up selling the building or the building changes hands with who the legal owner is. And that's a really good question. And to answer that, Fran, ultimately you would pass along the PPA to the next buyer. And it has been proven, research has more been done in the residential market, but having solar nationwide increases the value of at least a residential home by 4%. And so extrapolating that to a house of worship or another nonprofit organization, you would just pass along that added value because ideally that organization that's going to be purchasing the building is going to be having a better rate than what they would get otherwise with the utility. And so it adds kind of a benefit to them working with your organization. So ultimately that agreement would be sold along with the building.
One more question came in that's roof related, which you touched on a little bit, but this attendee is saying, asking about the feasibility of installing a roof mounted solar when you've got a bunch of HVAC equipment on the roof.
Yeah, so depending how much HVAC you have and depending on what your organization's usage is, something that we can offer, and this is something fairly new in the New England market. It's been something that's been more done in like New York City, in Washington, D.C., is this post and rail racking solution that I alluded to. And we're working with a few clients on it at the moment. But essentially what it is it elevates your solar system above all the HVAC. So you're able to have like a clear space that you can install far more solar on than you could if you were dodging the different HVAC units, because there is obligatory setbacks that you need to have from HVAC units. The caveat there being that it is, because you have to pay for more steel, it is a more expensive option. So it really makes sense if you have a pretty large roof and a fairly large electricity usage, but hopefully we'll see those prices come down. And then if you have a lot of HVAC and you still have some space, we definitely can navigate throwing some panels on the roof, even if we can't maximize the entire space with all the installed equipment that's already on there.
I saw a couple of questions about snow and how you deal with snow. And I can say again from my experience, both at my house and at my church, it definitely will decrease the amount of production for a couple of days, probably. Most snowstorms, if it's, just a couple of inches, the next time the sun comes up, the warm up, the snow will slide off the panels and they'll begin producing again. You do have to be a little careful if they are positioned somewhere where there's a sidewalk or cars parked beneath it. You want to either have snow stops on the roof, or I know at my church, the snow dumps right off onto the parking lot. And so I put out some little, caution tape to keep people, a few feet back from where that snow is likely to fall. So something to think about, but not really a big issue. Though I will say also back in, I think it was the winter of 2014, 2015, when we had just those horrendous amounts of snow. There was enough snow that during the entire month of January, our panels produced nothing because they were buried under like a foot or more of snow. So there can be those times where you lose production.
And if you want to read a lot about weather and snow and its interaction with solar, Rachel here, our moderator, just wrote a really nice blog post on it. And that has been copied and pasted into the chat. So please feel free to check that out if you want more resources. And thanks, Rachel. And I want to quickly say, I just saw an interesting question about, it looks like a lot of our house of worship projects don't have solar on the sanctuary or the nave, but rather on other buildings. And is that because of historical preservation? And the answer is, it depends if an organization is under a historical designation. If it is, there can be workarounds where you're able to put up all black panels, which are a little bit more sleek looking. And we have found with quite a few historical designation committees that that is an adequate solution. And then there are some municipalities that are very strict on historical designation. And then often it's better that we avoid those buildings entirely and focus on the parish hall or the rectory or some other building. So it's a very much a it depends answer, but there are often ways around it.
And there also was an earlier question from Wenham, and someone I had spoken to a few months ago about how do you deal with historic commissions. And Wenham has a particularly strict one, apparently, because I've seen cases where it ranges from, like in Wenham, it's like, over our dead bodies, will you ever put panels up in our historic district, which actually is I don't know what the right, it's verging on illegal for them to do that, because there was a church in Bedford that ended up in a lawsuit with their historic commission. It went to the Supreme Judicial Court, and the Supreme Judicial Court said the historic commission could not forbid panels because it was a First Amendment freedom of religion issue, because they're again expressing their concern for God's creation by doing panels. But apparently in Wenham, they're willing to continue that legal fight. There was another case, a church where they were right on the town green, totally visible. They put the panels up on their sanctuary roof. And the Town Historic Commission said, gee, we'd really rather you didn't, but we can't stop you. And I think in that case, to your point, Macy, they did use the all black panels. So they do kind of fade a little bit more. If you don't, if you just sort of look out of the corner of your eye, you think it's just a roof, and you don't know that they're panels. But it is, I think, a very kind of case by case basis with the historic commissions.
Great. Well, there's a lot of questions here, and really good questions. And we are unfortunately at the hour. However, I want to say that to every single person who asked a question in the Q&A box as well as in the comment box, we have copied down your email address and your name and your question, and we will be sure to get back to you with an answer before the end of the week. So yeah, so with that, really appreciate everyone coming out and listening to us. And yeah, I hope that this presentation helps quell some of the concerns about considering solar for your nonprofit. And please know that you can reach out to Jim and I at our email addresses here at any time, and we're very happy to be a resource.
Absolutely. Thank you all, and let's go solar.
Solar. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.